Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, August 18th, 2014, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, documents reveal that the U.S. Army is preparing to use lethal force against unarmed civilians during full-scale riots in the U.S. Meanwhile, the police in Ferguson are ordered to stand down during rampant looting. Plus, the Nation of Islam and the new Black Panthers are now behind the scenes attempting to direct the protest in Ferguson, Missouri, as the police state continues. Up next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
Well, the events in Ferguson, Missouri have alternated between peaceful protests and full-out looting. And of course, the police have alternated between attacking the peaceful protests and completely ignoring the looting, being MIA. Well, not exactly MIA, because they're actually there, but they're just not doing anything. And this article on Infowars.com from Michael Snyder says, why were the police in Ferguson told not to stop the rampant looting on Friday night? It says on Friday night, the city of Ferguson, Missouri was absolutely packed with militarized police, but when the looting started, they did nothing about it. In fact, news reports indicate that the police were lined up just blocks from where the looting was happening, but didn't make any attempt to stop it. According to eyewitnesses, police vehicles were seen driving by some of the stores while they were being looted, still did not respond. And we see USA Today says they did not even attempt to stop any looting. We see from the Fox affiliate in St. Louis, they said the officers left the scene in Ferguson once the looters began attacking the business overnight. Again, from Fox News, a reporter from the station tweeted that police cars were seen driving past some of the stores being looted and did not respond. This is not just us reporting this from the InfoWars reporters on the scene. These are the trustworthy mainstream media reporters saying that the police did nothing about it. And so Paul Joseph Watson asks, are the Ferguson riots being exacerbated by violent provocateurs? He says, with the National Guard now being sent to Ferguson, as the unrest extends into a second week, questions are being asked as to whether provocateurs are being used by authorities to stage violence in order to justify a militarized police crackdown. Radio host Dave Hodges claimed to have spoken to a source within Homeland Security that said that violent rioting and looting was encouraged and exacerbated by undercover DHS agents posing as members of the new Black Panthers. He said, in the past 5 days, I have been contacted via one of my most trusted sources, a member of DHS, who is opposed to the events and DHS involvement in Ferguson, Missouri. The source stated that DHS is running the Ferguson Police Department and that their actions are designed to antagonize and to provoke the locals to violence. He further stated he believed that the ultimate goal was to inflame the local citizens to such a point that martial law would be declared. And of course, we've had members of the Black Panthers being caught working undercover in the past for the FBI as informants, as Al Sharpton. So we see that the locals here are now welcoming the federal troops' involvement. They're welcoming federalization of this situation. They're welcoming National Guard troops being put in. They're welcoming people like the new Black Panthers and Al Sharpton. And what's developing here is a full spectrum dominance and manipulation of this, just as they dominate with both sides the elections, controlling both the Democrats and Republicans, same ones being controlled by the same people. Is the purpose here to create a situation that they can then move to martial law? Well, the Nation of Islam and the new Black Panthers are directing violent protests in Ferguson. Malik Shabazz said, as you well know, on Thursday night, my group, and thanks to you, my organizers, along with the new Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam, we are the ones who put those men in the streets and we control the flow of traffic. And the captain of the Missouri Highway Patrol, Ron Johnson, who's now been put in charge by the governor, agreed with those statements. And Shabazz said the curfew enforced by the police represents a prescription for confrontation. Of course, I think that's true. I think they are trying to create a prescription for confrontation. I think they are trying to draw a line in the sand. And if we look at the document that has now come out, training the Army on how they're going to handle this kind of civil unrest, we see that they're fully aware of exactly the types of situations that they try to portray as mistakes. They're fully aware of these. I don't believe they're mistakes at all. Now, this article from Paul Joseph Watson from InfoWars Today says, According to this document, Army is preparing to use lethal force against, quote, unarmed civilians during, quote, full-scale riots in the United States. A document released by the U.S. Army details preparations for full-scale riots within the U.S. during which troops may be forced to engage in, quote, lethal response to deal with unruly crowds or demonstrators. This is a document, about 132 pages, going back only to April of this year, released by Public Intelligence, and this applies not only to operations outside the United States, but also to continental United States, to CONUS, as it points out. And they say the most shocking aspect of this document is the fact that it describes the deployment of a lethal response directed against unarmed civilians, including sniper response and small arms direct fire. Now, you remember that at the very beginning of our coverage last week, we were showing pictures of the military, of course, not only just pointing rifles at people, but lasering them with sniper scopes from quite a bit of a distance, certainly enough of a distance that these protesters, who at that point were very peacefully protesting, they were standing there, screaming at them, but they were not doing anything violent. Still, they were lighting them up with lasers from their scopes. Now, if you look at this graph that's on the article, you can see what they're doing. They basically have laid out in this report a graduated response matrix, is what they call it. And they start out, and if you look at this, report here, you see that they have crowd control, and they have it broken down into unarmed civilians as well as armed civilians and armed crowds and with military firearms. The armed civilians include people that just may have knives and clubs. But look at what they're willing to do. They're willing to use snipers against unarmed crowds, and what they point out is they want to target leaders of troublemakers, okay? And then if the snipers don't make the crowd stand down, then what they do is they move to the next level of response, which is just to have all the soldiers start to shoot at the crowd with small arms fire. If that doesn't work, their matrix then goes to a full-out airstrike, They talk about how they will have to weigh the collateral damage and see if it's worth it. This is full-out war on the American people. This is not a riot control situation. This is not a policing situation. This is a recipe for full-out war on the American people. If you look at the next chart that's on this article, where they identify the various parts of the human body and where they're going to inflict different levels of damage to people using riot gear, using clubs and that sort of thing. They have 3 different areas that are color-coded on here where they can do low-level trauma, or where they can do moderate-level trauma, or where they can use deadly force. Now, when we look at things like this, it's very troubling in this last week to look at the response from people on the ground who in many ways really understand what's going on. I remember when we had someone that Alex was talking to on the radio, Joe Biggs was talking to him, Alex interviewed him, and the fellow really understood how they were demonizing Michael Brown by releasing a report about the robbery at the convenience store. At the same time, the police said that had nothing to do with the particular incident. Then he turned on it and said he was very glad that the federal forces were coming in to try to get this under control, gave credit to Obama. When you look at something like this, when you look at them marking out how they're going to inflict trauma at different levels to you, how they might inflict deadly force, it reminds me of cattle that might look at something that kind of identifies different choice cuts of meat that they're going to take out of this cow. And the cow might look at that and say, well, I simply can't believe that they would do that because they feed me very well. They take care of me. That's what's happening. That's the mindset of the left. They can't see where this is going. We've been looking at the reports. We have actually gone to one of the training facilities at AP Hill. And of course, that's not the only one. There's Camp Lejeune, and there's also the training facility just outside of Atlanta, where we saw this and where Alex Jones pointed out what was really going to come.
It shows the military rounding people up, and every one of them is black. Now, that's newsworthy right there. I've been to these drills where they all are farmers wearing John Deere caps and stuff, saying, you know, you can't take my land, you can't take my guns. Very scary stuff. But it was a black farmer, white farmer, Hispanic farmer. Little extra black folks. I mean, obviously saying, oh, it's for Al-Qaeda, that's a bad group, but it's really for all Americans. Oh, well, blacks, you know, they're kind of looked down on quietly by some people. Oh, look, it's for blacks, so it's okay. And it's military and white guys, white civilians looking on as groups of blacks tump over cars and, you know, get rounded up and thrown behind barbed wire. I mean, this is pretty outrageous. But don't expect Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton, the race baiters, to say anything. They're just there to create more racial division in this country, not actually point out that there's preparation to target black communities.
It was very interesting to look at this document that just came out in April and look at how they acted in Ferguson, Missouri. First, using snipers to target leaders of the protests. Then, going against the crowd in a way that they know is going to increase violence. Also drawing lines in the sand, telling them to move from one place to the other, hoping, I believe, to create a pretext for them to move against the crowd. Now, it's interesting to note that just back in June, there was a bill before Congress to try to step down the militarization of the police. And of course, Ferguson's congressman voted for that, but so did most of the Democrats and most of the Republicans. It was 355 congressmen who voted down this attempt to rein in the militarization of the police, supplying them with all of this equipment that they then use, as we've seen in Ferguson. It was 145 Democrats who voted to continue giving this to the police departments, and 210 Republicans. Now, that program, of course, is the Pentagon's 1033 program. Listen to what they will supply to domestic law enforcement agencies. Aircraft, including unmanned aerial vehicles, armored vehicles, grenade launchers, silencers that I guess they can put on their sniper rifles, toxicological agents, including chemical agents, biological agents, and associated equipment, launch vehicles, guided missiles, ballistic missiles, rockets, torpedoes, bombs, mines, or nuclear weapons. Nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, they will go that far in terms of giving that to law enforcement. Do you really want to give that to law enforcement after what we've seen in the last week? I don't. Now, look at some of the people, some of the fallout, the casualties of this use of non-lethal force. We have, of course, a female pastor who was there praying with people, trying to move people peacefully out of the way so that the police would not have a pretext to move against the crowd. She was shot with a rubber bullet while chanting Jesus in Ferguson, Missouri. You can take a look at that shot there. And, of course, we have the shot of our own reporter, Joe Biggs, who was also struck with a rubber bullet. Rubber bullets were created by the British military to try to control the people in Ireland in the 1970s. Rubber bullets are very serious weapons. They are not foam earplugs, as the Huffington Post reporter thought. No, rubber bullets were created by the British government to try to control the Irish in the 1970s. And listen to this, in a study of injuries, 90 patients injured by rubber bullets, 1 died, 17 suffered permanent disabilities or deformities, and 41 required hospital treatment after being fired upon with rubber bullets. They sound like they're pretty safe, but they are metal wrapped in a very, very hard rubber and shot out of a gun. You can kill people, and they do, in fact, kill people with it. And of course, the police don't like to be filmed. We have more verification that they were not trying to help the Al Jazeera reporters when they shot tear gas at the reporter standing there, obviously with television cameras, with lights. They were trying to shut that down. That's one of the things that you saw them do. They then took those lights, put them down the ground. They took the camera and pointed it at the ground. And we have a video that's now come up, a Ferguson cop threatening to shoot a journalist. He yells a bunch of explicatives at him and says, "Get that light off or you're going to get shot with this." So the police don't want what they're doing filmed when they're not doing the right thing. And so the Wall Street Journal asks, what happens when the police wear body cameras? And they point out that in Rialto, California, where an entire police force is now wearing so-called body-mounted cameras, no bigger than pagers, that record everything that transpires between the officers and citizens. In the first year after they started having the officers wear cameras, the use of force by officers declined by 60%. And citizen complaints against them fell by 88%. Of course, they point out that the police unions are very unhappy with this. They point out police unions fought dash cameras in police cars, which has now become pretty standard. We have a right to film what is happening in public. We have that right as individual citizens. We certainly have that right as members of the press. And anything that happens in public is fair game. And so certainly the police, when they are interacting with people where there's possibility of the use of force, if they were honest, they would want to have that recorded. Now, we see a lot of people celebrating, especially the liberal Democrats who think that Obama is now going to save them with the National Guard. They're cheering the National Guard being deployed in Ferguson, Missouri. And of course, it looks like they're going to be coming out immediately. Now, they don't feel the same way about the National Guard being used to protect our borders by the Texas governor, by Governor Perry. And of course, there's questions in my mind as to why they took them 30 days to deploy, but they actually did deploy last Thursday. Now, the interesting thing is the reaction from the Mexican government. They are protesting the fact that we have national troops guarding our border. The Mexican Foreign Ministry protested Governor Rick Perry's deployment of National Guard troops to the southern border. And it says, according to the AP, to halt the surge of child immigrants. Of course, it's only children, you know, that are coming across. There's no adults and no drug dealers. And as we pointed out time and again, many of those coming across are teenage gang members of drug cartels, many adults. The children, according to the figures that have been released by the government, comprise at most about 18% of those who are coming across the border, but yet they always portray it as nothing but children. And the Mexican government says that they want to reiterate in a firm and categorical way their rejection of this measure. They say no circumstance at all or change in the border security exists that justifies this measure taken by the state. They go on to say that it doesn't contribute in any way to solving the immigration problem. I would agree with them. Probably it doesn't, because these National Guard troop soldiers cannot detain undocumented immigrants, as the AP calls them. Of course, they're illegal aliens. They say that is a federal responsibility. A federal responsibility that the federal government is not taking care of. Now, of course, over the weekend, we see Governor Perry having felony charges brought against him. And many people, even liberals, are pointing out that this is nonsense. Alan Dershowitz is saying that. We have David Axelrod saying that. If you look at the indictment, it's basically 2 counts. One of them is that he intentionally or knowingly misused government property. In other words, he didn't spend the money that was allocated for this public integrity unit. Can you believe it? This is a public integrity unit that is headed by this drunken DA who is verbally abusive. The police wanted her to be taken out. And of course, Perry threatened a veto, and that's count number 2. They say that he threatened to veto legislation. Well, that is his prerogative as governor.
I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox Special at InfoWarsLife.com.
City of Austin tap water versus filtered City of Austin tap water.
I can taste dirt in it.
God knows what's in this.
This has an aftertaste.
Tastes like Austin water? Yeah, it does. Ugh.
These people just sampled City of Austin tap water straight from the faucet. Next, we had them try a sample of tap water filtered through the ProPure G2.0 filtration system.
High quality H2O.
That one is better.
Tastes like nothing.
Yep, I know what good water tastes like. It's good water.
Most tap water contains added substances like fluoride, chlorine, Monsanto's deadly pesticide, glyphosate, and many others. Studies prove that these substances are linked to an assortment of major health issues, including tooth decay, lowered IQ, and even cancer.
It tastes like you're drinking out of the lake when you're drinking tap water.
Yeah, it has that processed flavor to it.
The ProPure G2.0 filtration system removes these deadly substances and many more, leaving only fresh-tasting, deliciously clean water.
Okay, this is very tasty.
It's good water.
Refreshing.
It's good.
Go to InfoWarsStore.com today. Use promo code WATER and save 10% off your ProPure purchase. Again, that's InfoWarsStore.com or call 1-888-253-3139.